So then we are back with more understandings from the time of the Second Tabernacle services. This translation used then is from the original manuscripts from the prophets of Yahweh, giving us then the understanding of the time of the end. Per the Torah, the prophets, and the writings, we find then Mashiyach, the prophet, explaining then the time of the end. And then it's very important for us then also memorizing the important factors related with Mashiyach, the prophet, in terms of the time of the end. So from the 61st chapter until the 66th chapter gives us then the time of the end per prophecies. So then we trace back the Leviticus, the 23rd chapter. Then we find then the relationship of heaven and the time of the earth. And then throughout the ages, as you can evaluate per each prophet, you find then the understandings lining up precisely on time. So then we can read it in the 61st chapter, and then we find the returning of the holy city is laid waste for many generations, and also then the refurbishment of the holy city and also the temple. However, during our time, we are then involved with many political situations around the world, because the nations, they came out of the time of deceit. It was 1,000 years of deceit, and each of us, we were born during the time of the deceit. Most of us adults were then born during the time of the deceit. So then it takes some time for us to come out of these entire 1,000 years granted for Nahashatan, because these 1,000 years, a person might say, is the then Nahashatanic time, where then the nations were absolutely deceived of the utmost, and then the truth is returning for a very short time. As we understand the time of the 1,000 years of the Mashiyach, where then Yahweh the Creator granted His Son 1,000 years of His time, started during the time when He was born, because He was born as the king, and He then was the king for 1,000 years. So when the people then began to read the autumn feast, not Revelation. Revelation is from the scandalized scripture. We are reading then from the time of the autumn feast, where then you begin to localize yourselves as then the Mashiyach taught us as His 1,000 years, and then the Hashatan's 1,000 years, and then a short time of reformation, or then refurbishment or restoration of the holy cities and the city, and also the returning of the temple. Then we understand later the tables of stones are going to be shown. Not the time yet. But then when the cities return first, and then comes a time when the Yahweh determines, then is a time for the rebuilding of the temple and the restoration of Jerusalem. So a lot of developments must take place in these next 20 years without reduction. And the reduction can be 5 years, 6 years, 7, 10, we don't know. Yahweh has then reserved for Himself this decision, where then we understand per the prophecies and times and seasons what's taking place. So nations then, while they are relating with each other, they are doing the usual of these 1,000 years of Nahashatan, and then ended in 1,009. However, the new understanding per prophecy is acknowledging the headship of China as the leader of the market. So then nations who then involved with the leaders who are wise should always give a preference of the Chinese system, because then they can line up themselves with the end of times events. It is for their benefit, understanding the time of the end as per the leader of the trades of the world. It's extremely simple to understand from the autumn feast viewpoint, because you find then the autumn feast explaining the nation in charge of the end of time trade given by the Mashiyach himself, while he was spending time with Samaritans, 2 days, he explained the Torah, the prophets, and the writings, and he gave them 2 days, 2,000 years of rulership of Gentile level. That's why when you read then the autumn feast, you find selection of positions of the Spirit and also the earth related with the same topic. So then, let's understand for a moment so you can have an idea what it means. When you read Autumn Feast, the 8th chapter, you find then Yohanan watching the burning lamp from afar. This burning lamp gives you the understanding of the earthly level. It is the atomic bomb, because Yohanan was watching from afar. Previously, when then the mountains then burning and then the waters contaminated, those were mountains of petroleum leaking into the sea. So kind of try to understand yourself watching this video from afar in the spirit, in observing and writing. Then in the 9th chapter you find in the star, or the burning star, then it starts the explanation of heaven's understanding related with the prophecy. However, then, when you begin to understand what it means, this area of heaven and the earth, heaven's level, then you have to subdivide in 2 positions: shofars and cups. Shofars, Nahashatans; cups, the Mashiyach. Those were not sounded by Nahashatan, but the judgment because of sin were directed by him, because he is the father of sin, and he then decided what should be the end. However, when you find then the limitations, how far this should be, then Yahweh intervenes, only placing a limit in where it should go. However, when you begin then to extend then the cups and also related with the shofars, you find the same line of understanding. So then, it is a structure of the autumn feast where then you begin to understand how it's structurized in times and seasons. That's why then when the Mashiyach said to Yohanan, and after these, meant up to this point where then the Torah is absolutely 100% satisfied, then Yohanan was given more regarding then the time of the end via autumn feast. So the nations then, they must prepare themselves and acknowledge the rulership in terms of the Chinese leader of the market of the end. It does not mean China is going to rule the nations. Simply means they have this computerized system where then politics and economy are going to be self-regulated. Politicians, they can make a decision in their own countries, absolutely. But then the Chinese electronic system is self-regulating and does not let any politician to scandalize for themselves, because the world is involved with it. You find then a reference point where if you screwed up the system in one country, you are going to hear from another country. So it is self-regulating. However, they can put up parameters per each of what they take from the system for their own countries, and how they do trade before this specialized system. So then, that's why you find then 10 chapters later, when it explains then Babylon and what went on in the spirit, you begin to understand every nation doing trade with China. You begin to understand why, because of the computerized system. It is so popular and so prosperous because it is self-regulating. Meaning every nation should line up with it, because then each nation can regulate their own governments via this system. So then you don't have to have, for instance, civil wars because politicians are scoundrels. No, you only adjust the economy as per these computerized system that every person in a home can use and be part of it. That's why it is so prosperous. So then nations should be considering this fact very seriously, because in the future is going to catch up with them, liking it or not. As faster as the nations they lined up with the Chinese trade, the best it is for them. It was chosen this way. Have this in mind. Previously, the politics of each country were then, in quote, born during the time of the deceit. We are no longer in the time of deceit. We are in the completion of the closing of the age based upon the holy prophecies of Yahweh. So then this age can be closed. And if a nation is ready for it, best yet. If a nation breaks, then they are going to be given help, but then they won't be able to catch up with the system. It is self-regulating system because of the times and seasons. There is no more time for the new system. The system is already created. And there is no relation primarily with the anti-Mashiyach. There is no relation with it yet. There is, however, the chance of every nation to line themselves up with the Chinese system, so then when it is implemented, they already know what to invest, what not, and what kind of a share they take out of this system as the citizens of their countries start doing trade with China. That's why you find every nation of the world doing trade with China, because it's related with a representative of a country. However, the citizens of this particular country is doing trade with the system via computer, but those are regulated with each government, making them individuals. So then you begin to understand why it's going to be so prosperous. And then the politicians, they won't be able to do what they used to do, because when they were learning their politics, it was during the time of the deceit. They were deceivers. But this time they can't do anymore. So there is a new movement of this Chinese system around the world. As you can observe, already the Citigroup of the United States and Bank of China, if you do a research on your computer, you'll find already a link with them. So it is the utmost importance for each nation to understand this point, because it is recorded, and we are during the time of the restoration, where it is the time perfectly for nations to line up with the end of time. Strictly trade. China has its own religion. They have their own system. They have their own production lines. They have their own people to do the work. They want to do trade, mostly related with the rebuilding of nations. After the breaking of the Eurozone, then this system is going to be very evident. In Great Britain, very wisely, already started with the yen in their own stock market. It is very wise, because they understand they are going to be the leaders of the entire Europe continent. Not only these continent, for instance, of Africa, as they are going to be developed because of the tabernacle, they are already going to be lining up themselves with the Chinese system, because it is the least expensive and can help them build. Thus the time of rebuilding. And you can be sure of it, the entire continent is going to be very involved with China. First, because it's logical, it is the least expensive, they can get more for their money, and they can rebuild faster. At least when they are dealing with the bulk or basics. So then it's very interesting, because the nations, they have the chance of lining up themselves and their agendas, and they can forget about what they have learned in the past. What they learned during the time of deceit was deceit. The system is coming where they have to relinquish what they have learned in the past. What they learned in the past, it won't work in the future anymore. Because the countries are transitioning themselves. Do you understand? Transitioning. Back then they could come up with schemes and plans because it was during the time of deceit. So deceit was taking place. But then the truth is coming back for a short time. It must be lined up with it. So then later we're going to explore more of these areas because then the nations can prepare themselves and being ready for the autumn feast. This is what then the Mashiyach wanted his people to be aware of and not be caught unawares. So then please stay tuned, much more coming up because then there is more the structuring of the revelation or then autumn feast after the 4th chapter. Then it's going to come the shofars and then the cups, and those are linked together. That's why it's so bad having those Megillas on flat surfaces and codexing them, because a person then doesn't understand. Has to be done as per the instructions, and during the time of the Mashiyach, those holy documents were separated by Megillas in specific jars of times and seasons. They were not mixed up. They did understand the times and the seasons, and they were separated as such. That's why when the Mashiyach he went to the temple to read Mashiyach the 61st chapter, he was reading a layer of the completion of the spring feast. He was given the Megillah of Mashiyach. He was given the Megillah of the layer related with the autumn feast in the future, where he did not read. But he read the spring feast, and when it was the time for him to read the autumn feast, he didn't. Though he had sections of what he was reading in the 61st related with the autumn feast, he did not read it. But he read the spring feast. So gives you then times and seasons as such. So then when the Mashiyach later, when he showed up to Yohanan, after these, Yohanan was there during the time he read the prophecy and it was completed. He was there with him. Then the Mashiyach was very simply saying, after these. And then Yohanan absolutely did understand. Up to the point where the Mashiyach was speaking to him, the Torah was satisfied 100%. So after this 100%, this is what comes in order the completion of the second half, autumn feast. And we have then 20 years roughly without reduction. So then we are becoming more and more used to the terms and used to the Aramaic English translation of the word, flushing ourselves from old traditions and old junks, because those were concocted during the time mostly of the deceit. And the deceit is gone. We are during the time of the truth, and the truth has to be then explained and trained and heard over and over and over again until people they get flushed out of junk. So then please stay tuned, much more coming up, because then the Mashiyach is going to explain what it means, then the structurization of then shofars and cups. Each of those, as there is a third layer below it, of taking places in the earth along with those. So multiple layers at the same time. And then we're going to investigate other prophets, where then we find the completion of this portion of it, and it is the autumn feast. So please stay tuned, much more coming up.